So this is Sornorra, Pongsakam playing black versus Remi Coulom playing white. And this is the world qualifier. It is for the Samsung Cup. It's generally usually the winner is a Taiwanese player, but this year we actually get our first Thailand player who made it to uh, the Samsung Cup. So I went ahead and already did some comments, but we're gonna go over more than what I've commented. I just have some stuff pre-set up ahead of time, so that way I don't feel like I'm. Uh... So I thought the opening was a little unorthodox. I have a really hard time playing these kinds of openings. I normally play very by the book when it comes to openings, except for the dragon enclosure. Hey, Max. Um, so here, white's or black is trying to get white to respond. So basically, this is a move where it's trying to get white to respond. Black wants white to kind of play a drop like this, which initially kind of splits the stones. But what black also wants is white to possibly respond like this, which kind of makes black really strong, but white also kind of unsettled. But here's the thing: is both of these moves are incorrect, and it's not the best way to settle here, um, because this stone is kind of floating still, and so it's just kind of out in the middle, and it's just not super important. Um, is this better than just splitting on Q13 directly? So definitely, this is definitely a better way of splitting with R8. This is definitely a better way of splitting the two groups. This is more severe, and it gives white really bad shape. So when we play here, and this becomes an option for white. But what's more so is that when we look at the move that white can actually play here, that gives him an okay shape to begin with. So what ends up happening is white actually comes into this corner. And so when we kind of go back here and we look at this splitting move, and if white plays here, we kind of see that it's not as severe anymore. Basically to play this move or this move. Um, so we're kind of giving white more options by playing this more direct split. And so because white can go ahead and play here. Um, and then if we kind of try to split, it becomes like a kind of a bigger battle. But white is also still comfortable to just go into the corner. Okay. I actually haven't. I don't get to see this Joseki often because I'm so nervous about getting into kind of like this splitting position as white. But it's actually a really good Joseki, especially when you're switching directions, because in these cases we can choose to go this way, uh, or we can choose to go this way, and so it's a really flexible Joseki. Now, of course, we do want to play this one as white, and the reason we're playing this way as white and instead of this way is because we're actually looking at direction. So we know that the bottom of the board here is more important for white, as to where when we're playing this way, we're kind of trying to say as white, this area of the board is important, but we can kind of clearly see that this is going to be harder to build on. So we don't play this way. So instead we choose this direction. Now, white makes kind of a move that I consider a little strange. I think that it's a little surprising to give up this stone. We can see that black just kind of gets to cut it off, and that's a lot of free points on the side of the board. So I think that white can actually go ahead and make a connection here instead. I think this connection is fine. And what's really good about this connection is that we can see that. So first, let's look at what white wants, right? So we can see that white wants to play the bottom of the board, right? But what if we can have both? And now I know that can be questionable because everyone's like, uh, Go is a game about trading. But in this case, the trade is better for black when we can make it an even or a closer trade. Like it's okay to have both here because we can connect here. And we can see that if black was to try to block us from the outside this way, this 4C move is very, very big. It's very severe, and we know it's severe because this move earlier was supposed to be severe. So that means this stone is now important. Basically, if white was or if black was to try to seal us off from this direction, there is a lot of Aji left over. Plus, if we ever can get back to this move, black now has to come back and live, right? And it's the same if we ever come back to this move. Now, obviously, this one's not going to be that great or as great, but it's still a way to kind of unsettle black's corner. But yeah, um, so we can kind of see again, we can see that if black wants to seal us on the outside, we get a nice severe move here, forcing black to fix their weakness. We come back here because we know that this is Sente because white needs to live, right? Oh, 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 black Ataris first. So white will come back and connect. And then black goes ahead and comes back to the corner to live. And so then we kind of get the jump out. And now you can kind of see that we fixed the weakness that we had here, but we also were able to come back and jump on the bottom of the board. Um, and so we kind of got both things that we wanted. And then another thing that black can do here, if they're afraid of black getting Sente here, because this is kind of why I think that they chose not to connect. I think white was afraid that black was going to get Sente here, but we remember that this is a very severe turn, and then we have so many options as white. You know, we can come back here and play this Hane here, which I think is not the best one. Um, Personally, I think this or this are the two best moves, which also come back to kind of what we wanted, and we still kind of get our free connection here as well. And then we can turn here if we want to. I would prefer not to turn here. I think even though it's pretty severe, um, I would still kind of be a little afraid because here we can kind of get this, and now the shape kind of looks a little strange. In black would then get Sente. But I do think that it's an option. I don't know if I'm showing a correct variation. I'm sure there's something more severe for black to get there. But that is what I was able to come up with. Um, so we can kind of see that black does get a little bit of a free move here, or a free cut. And so we kind of go back into like basic Joseki. Pretty basic up here. And then I'm always worried about these kinds of positions. I've thought about doing something like this, but I feel like white will not allow that to simply happen. I feel like white will play something like this, and then we're kind of low to the corner in the second line, so this may not be the best option. Um, but I actually think that black handled this very well. And so here we actually have two options. And they actually lead to very different things. And this was one of the cool things that I had written out. So basically, in the game, white decides to play this one. But I want to point out that there's actually another option. And some people may think that this is the same thing, especially if white just takes. And one of the reasons that most people would Atari on top here first is because obviously, you know, you want this Atari first, because if white takes this stone, we can kind of see we get it into like a co-position almost. And this result would be very bad for white. So most people think it makes sense to play this Atari first, and then we're forcing white to kind of respond here at K18, and then we can come back to F18. But that's not true. There's a reason we can't play this way. Um, in this case, white can go ahead and actually drop to this second line because we're only getting one stone. We're only getting one stone here. But let's go back to the other position. So what makes this different then? So if white were to connect here, or no, we're playing the other way. And so if we were to play this drop down instead of the overhead move first, and white just kind of Tanukis back to D18 or D2 like we did before, I'm really going to have to fix those coordinates every time I record. I need to figure out how to change Fox's coordinates to upside right. Anyway, sorry, that's bothering me because I want to say D18, but then for you guys it's D2. Anyway, um, so we can see that now if white drops here to D18, the same way that we did in our other variation, and black now can play this. And so if white takes this, it goes back into that bad variation that we talked about, where white's really low and they're now pressured right into a ko. We kind of get that same variation, but the routes that we got there almost seemed the same. So it's really important that we think about our order of moves to make sure that we're getting the most out of them, because we can really get mixed up if we don't. So in this case, we know that black is not going to play f18. Instead, they're going to play this one because d18 or f18 or f2 in your guys' case, I'm so sorry, um, is no longer a Sente move, and white can actually now drop here for free. And if black comes back and fixes, well, then it's kind of strange. This move's kind of out of place. We had no reason to play it. It's just a bad move now. And so that's really important to think about. And I think that both variations are fine. I think that's uh, just my opinion here. I think that both these moves are fine for black. This option is fine for black, and the option that black took is also fine. These are both acceptable solutions. Um, I think if anyone is better, it's probably only by like a point, which might mean a lot at this level. But I think that on certain board positions, both are acceptable. And so we continue the game here. I think that this move was very quick. Uh, and the reason I say quick is because I feel like there's a really clever Tsuji here that was not noticed by white. Um, so we have to ask ourselves, what does white want out of the board right now? Um, Personally, I think that what's important to white is can I use, okay, I can't. Okay, so what I think is important is the bottom of the board for white. But what's also really important is to kind of start building a wall towards the center of the board. And white wants to find an efficient way to do that. And I think that was also white's plan. But white gave up a lot doing that, and they didn't find a really cool Tsuji here. So we can kind of see that white. So I'll go ahead and show you a little bit of what happens. And so we can kind of see that white gets the bottom here and gets a wall, but this is actually not the best way to do that. There's actually a really cool way to do that. And so when we go back here and we start looking at this move here, so this is uh, kind of a variation that we might all know, or like a move that almost a Tsutsuji or move we might all know, which is hitting your head on two stones almost. Except obviously, the variation that you might be thinking about for hitting your head on two stones might be this one, and then this. But the concept is almost the same here. So when black chooses to block here, and we come out to the left side, black can't actually cut us anymore. Because if they play here, they're lacking the liberties, right? And if they play here, they're still lacking the liberties. And then probably the most common approach might be to try to play this clamp, but now we're in self-Atari. So black inevitably has to connect. And the result is just simply too good for white. And so what are black's options then? And so black does have an option, and black can go ahead and actually turn here. But there still brings about problems here. White can go ahead and attach here. White may feel forced to kind of like fix this, and we're still kind of getting this wall towards the center of the board. So there's a lot of options for white here. So it's a very difficult move to respond to for black. Um, and we kind of actually get a similar thing a little later. And so we go back through here. And here you can see that I've marked this spot because there's actually still a lot of Aji here. And so if we go ahead and play this move now, and we try to think about what we're going to do here as white, but we actually run into a liberty issue again. Sure, we can go ahead and play this way, but it almost feels like it's not worth cutting these white stones off. So then we have to think about otherwise. Okay, well, we go back to the clamp idea that we had. But again, we're in self-Atari. So in this case, maybe black jumps out. But no, that's not the answer either, because white's going to go ahead and capture these third line stones here. And so we're just kind of alive here. So white kind of gets out like a bandit in this situation. Um, However, white does not actually take advantage of that cutting point, and he decides to just come back and play up here. And so I think white got scammed. I think this is where white truly started to fall behind. Um, and so white decides to go here. And now their decision, as we saw, white is still going for the center. And we can see that white chooses to sacrifice these stones. But I actually think that it's not worth the trade. Um, we do give up a lot to kind of seal off the center, and we're not completely sealed off. Um, I do think it's important to go for the center, but I think it's also important to note that black still has a lot of access to the center, so to give up so much probably isn't worth it. And you can kind of see that we kind of wanted to how important it might have been to play R7 earlier. And so I think that white should have taken the bottom of the board instead. And this would have also fixed black's problem of R7. We can kind of see that if black passes now and we kind of try to go back into this R7 variation, it's just not working the same way that it was. And I feel like black also, in turn, got scammed. I think that the variation is better for black, but I think that black also took the center for granted because this result is still okay for white. It's not as good as it could have been, but it's still acceptable. And so what black could have done instead is just to simply connect here. And so we can kind of see that black just escapes. But what makes this variation so good for black is that white needs another move here to go ahead and connect up, because if we don't, we run into issues. And it's really important for us to stay connected in this situation. But black decides that this is the easier to follow variation. And they play this cutting point here. Um, and another thing that white could have done here is that they could have went and played this, which I also think is an option. I still think that giving up these marked stones here that I'm going to go ahead and mark for you guys, and then the invisible stone that you can't see there yet, is just not a very good idea. I think that the trade is not worth it. And we can go ahead and play out this variation here. And so it's not bad for white to take solid points on the bottom and to kind of fight this floating group. I think that white has a lot more options, especially when there's moves so many moves about like the marked point, and then we've just leaned on this stone. I think that it's a hard, or not hard. I think the game is still even, but I think the fight is harder for black in this position than in the game. But black decides to give up the stones instead. And I think that at this point, white is still slightly leading. I think white has a slight advantage from the earlier variations. And so black decides that he's going to kind of try to create some points in the center. I think this move was probably a little slow. I think white should, or black might consider coming back to these options. And one of the reasons that we can do that here is because we know that this move is not as severe as it used to be. In the past, we might have played this move, but you'll actually find that in more recent games, more recent professional games, that this move is just not as strong as it used to be, not as severe as it used to be. So white caps, and one of the reasons that they play this cap, we can kind of see here, is that our mark stones are not alive yet. And our mark stones here are also not alive yet. So white wants to capitalize on splitting them. Now it is hard to kill both groups, but it is a nice splitting attack. Kids these days always wanting the newest, shiniest thing. And so I think that this is a good, so this is kind of the shape points that a lot of people might be thinking about. And it is a really good poke point, but we're kind of running into a problem here. Does anybody know what a big problem we have here as white is? I'm sorry, we're trying to attack something, but we're trying to attack something with a lot of cutting points. We've got so many here. We've got so many cutting points. We've got 3 that we're going to have to deal with. So we're trying to attack something while we're very susceptible to being attacked. And we can actually see that black goes ahead and tries to take advantage of all those cutting points. But first, we're going to go ahead and look at some variations of what kind of like the other options might look like. And so if we go ahead and play out this, we're kind of getting sealed in as white now. And now we have to fight ourselves. But what's even more so is we've got a lot of Aji here. There's a lot more cutting points here that have to be taken care of. And so maybe we don't have time to play L8. And then we can go ahead and look at the cut in this way. It's kind of the same situation. We're dealing with a lot of cutting points. And then so here we see that white tries to defend. And so white's trying to defend here. And the reason that white chooses to defend here is because they're actually trying to look for this this cutting point here. So like let's say black plays somewhere else, we can see that there's no Atari here anymore. Before white was in Atari if black played here. But white's running into issues again. We got so many cutting points. We're already cut in 1. So now we're about to be cut in 2 more. And so black plays a really cool Tsuji here. I absolutely love this move because we talked about the basic cutting points being here and here. But what's really cool is this adds a third cutting point. This adds an extra cutting point, an extra layer to the cutting points, which we can see kind of black executes really nicely here. And now we have a situation where these stones are connected up, but also white has this way out. And on top of that, later on, we get to come back here and capture these extra stones. So black played this out very nicely. And I think this is where black took the advantage in the game as well. Let's see. Where was I? Okay, yeah. So here, I actually was surprised that black chose to play this move. I think that this move should have been played a lot sooner. We can see that if white tries to save it, black kind of creates some shape here. I don't know what the correct variation would be, but this is my thought as to what would happen. And I think it's a lot better than this move. And so we can see white Hane's on the outside. And I do not like this move. I don't know if it's a bad move. I understand white's worry, but we have to remember that MP triangle is not a great shape. It can be good sometimes, but we have to be really mindful of when playing it. So black has a lot of room here to live, and we've already established that black's kind of connected up almost between all of these groups. Um, and they have so much room to run. So we're playing an empty triangle in a situation where we're trying to attack a really strong black group that has a lot of room to live. Um, so maybe it's okay to play here. I'm not going to say for sure, but I think that this is the general shape that we might see in a normal game. Um, but I think that it is also possibly okay for white to play the empty triangle in this position. I just think that the attack is very hard for black, or hard for white. And so I think this is a cool move. And I think white plays wrong here. So white Atari's here first, which is good. And we can see white comes back and fixes. But I think there's a better way to fix here. Hold on. Oh, I forgot to talk about this variation. Sorry. And so the reason that this move is so cool for black, one of the reasons I like this move for black is because we're actually trying to look at the the ladder here. And so if we go ahead and play out that ladder, we can see that it activates a ladder breaker. Um, so then we go ahead and skip ahead and we see that white defends here. But this just defends the ladder. Is there a better way that we can play this? Well, yeah, there is actually. What if we play here? And so you might think, okay, well, then don't we just play out the ladder now? Well, no, because now we have a really cool net. But we're also playing into white's area. We're threatening this really important elephant's eye. So we're kind of protecting 2 points at the same time. But then people might be afraid of this move. They're now kind of getting cut off in both places. But this is where we consider value. We think about the value of these stones. What is the purpose of these stones? They don't really have a lot of purpose other than they're kind of big. But what if we're going to get something even bigger in exchange? So we go ahead and play it out. So then you're like, okay, well, then I get to come out here now, don't I? I got the ladder breaker. Well, yeah, you do. But what about your top group? Your top group is now floating and it's probably not going to live. And black's running into another issue. They've got to play another move. They don't have the time to come back here because we're going to go ahead and just kill this group now. So you have to be really careful when you're trying to make these trades because you might just end up making a really bad trade. And so, yeah. So I think that this might have been a better defense than just simply playing to protect the ladder. And so white sorry. And so black goes ahead and also defends their cutting point because we know that black is kind of not fully connected up. So we go ahead and we fix our area. And white plays a really powerful move, which is the elephant's eye. Now that white is stronger here, we can go ahead and play this split. And so this is a Tsuji for black to make eye shape. However, white does something that I think is questionable here. It is better to drop down here. It's definitely better to drop down here. This corner is actually massive, and white doesn't have to really worry about black doing anything there. Black will still have to come back and make life, though, which is great because that's exactly what we want. Now, of course, black will still live comfortably. You know, he's got an Atari here. White has to take this stone and Atari here. You know, we can't play here because we're going to fall behind in liberties. But we're not giving up our corner anymore. And so that's what this kind of is for black to go ahead and make eyes a little bit more comfortably. And that's kind of what they end up doing. And so they go ahead and make simple shape. And now we're in endgame. We're kind of, it might not look like the end of the game to most people, but this is pretty much where endgame is really going to start taking precedent. The bigger moves are going to be the ones that gain the most points in the endgame. And so that's kind of what these marked points are. These are all the biggest points on the board. My weakest point is endgame. My endgame is fine, but it's my weakest point. I couldn't tell you which one's the biggest, so I went ahead and I marked some moves that you might think about for the endgame. I don't go over any of them. I think they're pretty basic. We can kind of see that this drop down gives us area over here. We can see that this connection is just really big in general. Um, we can see protecting this cutting point is really big. So these are all really big moves to think about. I don't know which one of them is correct. I will leave you to do your own research, which I will go ahead and mention now. There will be a clean downloadable SGF with comments of mine on them, and without all of the other stuff that I've been adding on with the stream. And then if you want more, you can obviously watch the stream, or you can watch the YouTube video when it goes up. But there will be a basic downloadable SGF on the YouTube video that will only have my comments on them without all of the extra. And so we can see that white goes ahead and chooses to play this one. And then we can also see that one thing here that you might be afraid of after black played c10 as well is that what if white does respond and black pushes through? Well, we kind of go back into that variation earlier where we saw the net and we got a really nice net here. So we're not really afraid of black kind of cutting through with this. Just in case anybody was kind of thinking about that now, because I can understand why this move might be scary for some if they don't know about the net. And so otherwise we kind of get this position, and that's just not good for us. We don't have to give up those stones because we can net them. And so we can see that black chooses this as the next biggest move. So let's go through here. And we're kind of just entering kind of a leisurely state state here. And I feel like here the game was basically over for white because I thought their next move was kind of sad in a way. We can see that white goes ahead and plays this underbelly move, which you might think is really important, and it is, right? We're going to need that to live, right? If black cuts through here, we're alive still, but that's not the big issue. You might be like, okay, well, if we're alive, then maybe there's something else on the board, but that's not really the point because this is actually pretty big. This is really big, but this is kind of lazy to me. We should not be just simply connecting under here. We are strong enough at this world qualifier level to go ahead and play this turn. And so then we're like, okay, but we're still afraid of this, right? Well, no, we're not, because we know that we can go ahead and win the Liberty race, which means that black would be forced to play here, and white isn't getting points there. So we can go ahead and take a look at the difference in the variations. So we can see that black is getting free points for absolutely no reason. And so we should not be allowing that to happen over something very, very simple and easy to read. However, my guess as to why he may have just connected under is he may have possibly been in Byoyomi. And I also feel like maybe white felt a little defeated at this point. I think that at this point, the game was about a 10-point lead. So white may have just felt, hey, I want to kind of get this over with. I don't know what for sure. That is just my guess as to why he may have played such a basic response rather than kind of trying to read it through. And so here, I think this is another situation where there was a bit of lazy reading going on, except this time we got a little bit of lazy reading or lazy counting from black. And so this move looks a little strange, but I actually think that white can do the same thing here without that. I think that white should just play here. The variation's almost going to be the same. So black will go ahead and block here, and white can go ahead and play this move and connect up under if they'd like. So we can kind of see that the same thing happens, except it's a little different because black decides to take this instead. But if we count it, we are actually gaining 2 points if we play here instead. If we just let white connect up under, it's perfectly fine. This is 2 points better for black. It is better to let white connect up here instead. But again, we might be in Byo-Yomi at this point, so maybe the counting at this point's a little harder to do. So we'll go ahead and continue the game. And black makes one really big mistake, but again, because we have a really big as black, a big lead as black, it's not that big of an issue. We can see that neither player is coming back to cut here or save here. And for like the longest time now, this is such a big move, right? So here, this one's understandable. We want to respond to this. But when black plays here, it's actually bigger to go ahead and cut here. And again, this is a situation where we need to be counting to make sure that we are playing the biggest move possible. This cut is much bigger than these, so it is perfectly okay for white to give up these stones in exchange. Um, what I also think is strange is that when white does come back here to protect here, black plays this move. I'm not quite sure. I could be completely wrong, but I think that black can connect here without issues. The most that actually we find this move. But again, I think that connecting here is still bigger. So I'll go ahead and show you guys the variation again, that why black may have played this move instead. So we'll go ahead and take a look at this. So if white pushes through here and black protects, we can see that it becomes Miai. So white is going to either get this move or white is going to get this move. And then if we play this way, we can see black can't block this direction because would be self-Atari. So white gets the final big move here. But again, we're still a little too far behind as white, unfortunately. We're down by about 10 points. And we'll go ahead and play out the rest of the game. And the game ends here. I believe white resigns, but black is ahead by about 15 points. And the game ends here. And so what ends up happening is we get our first Thailand player in the Samsung Cup. This is Sornorra's first time getting into the Samsung Cup, and it's Thailand's first time getting into the Samsung Cup. And it's very exciting. It's always really exciting to see other regions. In fact, it's really fun in general to see any underdog play in a really big tournament. So I'm really excited regardless. Um, and I hope everyone else is also excited. But yeah, I hope you all enjoyed the review. And that was the end of the game. We'll go ahead and end the recording.